Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. And for today's review, I'm going to talk about Chevelle's newest release that came out on March 5th, Niratias, better known by its acronym as Nothing is Real, and this is a simulation. Yes, the boys out of Chicago are at it again, and they released another great gem for us, especially as we slowly come out of the pandemic. This is actually the first time I ever delved into one of their newer albums, because I've been used to listening to their older stuff like Wonder What Happens Next, Venezuela, and Sci-Fi Crimes. And I really wanted to do a review on this particular album because I wanted to see if they quote-unquote stuck to their guns with their sound, or if they were on the fence with becoming mainstream, kind of similar to the review I did last week with A Day to Remember's release, You're Welcome. So as we go through this review, I'm going to talk about the band's background here, as well as the music and lyrical themes. I'll touch on the production and what I thought about it overall, and then I'll give you guys my grade at the end about what I thought about this album. So without further ado, let's get into it. So a little background about this album. It turns out that the Loafer brothers had got into the studio about mid-2019, and they went on to produce 8 songs, but then they did 5 more. Unfortunately, they didn't finish the album until March of 2020, which is when the pandemic hit and all the lockdowns were put into place. After waiting close to about a year, they decided to put the album out there so folks can listen to it, even though they couldn't go on tour to support it. The album is produced by Joe Barresi, who had produced their last 3 albums in his studio in Pasadena, California. It's considered a concept album because it does, 3 instrumentals, and then there's spoken tracks throughout it. So it's definitely a lot different than what their past works were like. The acronym that would eventually become the album's name was played around by Pete Loafer, and it seems like it dives into the simulation theory, even though he's not a conspiracy theorist or anything like that. He really liked the scientific theory that was behind it, and he also referenced Groundhog's Day as another reason for the name. It's an interesting title, as the lyrics talk a lot about interstellar travel for Star Trek lovers, and even references Elon Musk's attempts to get to Mars. And there's a good number of songs that make up the majority of the album. Other topics talk about anger and mistrust at leadership, like the songs Peach and Self-Destructor, loss, like the song Endlessly, and the past, like Remember When. Musically, we still see the heavy side to their sound that they've been known to do on their last couple albums. But we also get hints of their old sound that they did back on their past works. It's really interesting because on this album we got a good amount of diversity as they incorporated pianos, the spoken tracks I mentioned earlier, they did percussion instruments like a timpani, and they had acoustic guitars. In an interview with Loudwire, Pete Loafer said he didn't just want to stick around in heavy rock, and he also pointed out that that was the reason why the album was much more melodic. The North Corridor, which they produced all the way back in 2016, you could say it was a bit more metal because there was a lot more screams. I think the guitars were maybe a lot more heavier. It was just an angry album, to say the least. Pete also stated that Joe had influenced him to write better and also do better with the current facades and skills that they had. And you know what? It was a long process, but it worked out for both parties in the end. So let's walk through each song really quick. The album didn't waste any time in getting you pumped up with the instrumental opener, Verrückt. I actually spelled it wrong, but whatever. And it's a nice little rock heavy song that sets the tone early, and it infuses a lot of the heaviness that they've been using since the North Corridor. Then we begin our journey aboard the Millennium Falcon, heading out to Mars with the songs So Long Mother Earth and Mars Simula. The titles speak for themselves, but musically, you really hear that Chevelle didn't deviate away from their core sound, and that's really clutch as compared to what had happened last week on my last review. Sleep the Deep is pretty much just a filler song. There wasn't really anything special to it. It was just really building up into the next song, Self-Destructor, which is one of their hit singles. Then the next one is Pilo Still Star. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but again, whatever. And those two right there, Self-Destructor and Pilo Still Star, they're just the same good old rock music that Chevelle has done throughout their careers. Wormhole is just a brief 19-second interlude that just leads into the next song, Peach. There's nothing really special about it. It just seemed like it was just killing time, really. But Peach was the next one, and it was one of their hit singles, and it really displayed the anger within the lyrics and the music. I would list that as my favorite of the album. Next song is Test, Test, Enough, which in my opinion, it struck me as having a subtle anger in the lyrics, but from what I could tell, it wasn't really interesting overall because all you have is just Pete singing, And it seems like he's just striking a guitar chord that reverberates for a couple seconds before it just fades out into silence. It was just another one of those ones that really didn't interest me. Then we get into what I consider the more touching songs, like Endlessly and Remember When. Endlessly really shows more of like the newer elements I was talking about with the timpani, and it also had like MIDI edited drums in it. And it had a little bit of like a touchy feel to it, especially since it was like dealing with floss. Remember When goes back to like the rock tune that they've been doing the whole time. And in my opinion, it struck me as having like a similar structure as well as sound to like songs from like Wonder What's Next. Just listen to the chorus and tell me what you think. I think I know what I'm talking about. Ghost and Razor, the longest song on the album. It's just another one of the typical Chevelle hard rock songs. Just has a nice vibe in it. Before we close out with the last song on the album, Lost in Digital Woods, which to me struck me as a bit strange. Mainly because it was like a soft-spoken poem with the keyboard playing in the background with some sort of somber tone. And that lasts about 2 minutes before it cuts off briefly. And then we just get some background noise to close it out with Pete wailing on his guitar. Honestly, the background noise kind of sounded a little bit like a horror movie, a real silent horror movie. I don't know. To me, it just seemed like a strange song to close out the album. The production that Joe did on this album was superb. Just from listening to the first couple tracks, Verrückt and Mother Earth, you really hear the power of the guitars, but they're at the right level that they're not like being dominant over the bass, vocals, and drums. Pete's vocals really stand out on this album, and they are really coherent as he exercises his vocal range both in the screaming and clean vocals. I went back a couple times just like check if I could see like any blemishes like here and there within each song, and I have to give Joe credit. I could not find any for the life of me. It's a really clean album, and everything's just at the right level so that you don't see like any sort of blemishes whatsoever. So for the last bit of critique, here are the pros and cons about this album. The pros are pretty much simple. The production is very well done. You get a good amount of diversity on this album, both musically and lyrically. And lastly, you see that Chevelle really stuck to the core sound that makes them them. For the cons, there really wasn't too much, but I wasn't too crazy about the instrumentals, except for Verrückt. Verrückt was a great opener, and that was definitely a good way to start off the album. But like songs like Sleep the Deep, Wormhole, and some of the other songs like Test Test Enough, even though that's not an instrumental, they just didn't entertain me, and I wasn't crazy about them. I don't know what it was really. It just didn't like appeal to me. But really, outside of that, and even what I explained earlier about Lost in Digital Woods, that was really the only con I could think of. And you know what? It's just good old Chevelle, and we're glad to have him back. In conclusion, I'm going to give this album a 9 out of 10. I saw some reviews that I mentioned earlier about it being a masterpiece, and you know what? They were dead on. It's a great album, and it shows that the boys are back out of Chicago making some great music, and we're looking forward to see what they could do in 2021. Hopefully they could do a tour soon. Really looking forward to it. Good luck, guys. So, if you like this video, make sure you hit that like button and leave a comment below about what you guys thought about the album. If you guys know about any artists that are just starting out, or if you're in a band yourself, let me know down in the comments below or on my social media pages. I'll leave the links to them in the description below. And if you want, I could do a review on them. As always, you're welcome to subscribe and make sure you hit that bell notification so you can see more content like this in the future. Thank you guys so much for watching. Stay safe. Stay tuned.